Tonight, a warm story from a little village far in the snowy north. On the longest, darkest night of the whole year, the night the whole village comes out into the cold and makes 1,000 small lights out of the snow. Far in the north, where the winters are long and white and the houses sit deep in the snow, there was a small village. And on this day, the shortest day of all the year, the sun had hardly climbed above the white hills before it began to sink again. By the middle of the afternoon, the light was already going. The sky over the snow turned from white to pale gold to a deep, cold blue, and the long, long night of midwinter, the longest night of the whole year, came down over the village. Little Nils stood at the window of his house and watched it come. He was 7, and the dark of this night always seemed to him a very big thing, bigger than the dark of ordinary nights, because it would last so long, all the long hours through to a late and grudging morning, the deepest dark of the deepest winter. The snow lay thick and blue-white over everything, over the roofs and the lane and the frozen river below the village, and the cold pressed soft and huge against the glass, and the dark came on. But Niels was not really afraid, because he knew what night this was. This was the night of the snow lanterns. On this one night every year, the longest and darkest of all, the whole village went out into the cold and the coming dark and made the snow into light. And Niels had been waiting for it for weeks. Already, out in the blue dusk, he could see the first of them starting, doors opening and warm yellow squares of lamplight falling out onto the snow, and people coming out wrapped up thick against the cold, their breath in clouds, gathering in the lane with mittened hands, beginning. His grandmother was getting into her coat. His mother was winding his scarf twice round his neck and pulling his hat down over his ears. "Come on then," she said. "There's a whole village to light." And out they went, into the cold and the dark and the start of the longest night. Out in the lane, the whole village was making lanterns out of the snow. It was a simple thing to make, a snow lantern, and even a small boy could do it. You took the cold, dry snow and packed it and patted it up into a little round dome, the size of a big loaf, firm and smooth. And then, very careful, you hollowed it out from underneath, scooping the inside away with your hands until the walls were thin enough that a light set inside would shine through. And that was all it was. A small, hollow house of snow, waiting for a candle. But when you made 100 of them, and 100 more, all down the lane and the paths and along the river, and when you lit them, the whole village turned to gold. So everyone made them. The whole village was out in the blue, cold dark, in 2s and 3s, bent over their patches of snow, packing and patting and hollowing, their breath going up in clouds, their hands going numb in their mittens, and nobody minding. The big people made the beer lanterns. The children made small wobbly ones of their own. Niels packed his snow and patted it round and hollowed it out with his cold red fingers, his tongue between his teeth, until he had made a snow lantern all of his own. A little crooked, but good and hollow, and ready for its light. His grandmother knelt down stiffly in the snow beside him to help with the hollowing, she who had made more of these than anyone alive, and laid her old mittened hands over his cold red ones and showed him how to scoop the inside away gently, a little at a time, so the thin walls would not crack. It was the way her own grandmother had shown her, she said. Kneeling in the snow on a longest night so long ago that the village had looked quite different then, and half the houses they now lived in had not yet been built. And under her hands the little lantern held, and was good. And it was not cold work, though the air was bitter and the dark was down, because everyone was doing it together. All up and down the lane there was the soft sound of snow being packed, and low talk, and somebody laughing, and a child calling out, and the squeak of boots in the cold snow, and the doing of it together. The whole village out in the dark with their hands in the snow, making the same small, beautiful thing, was so warm a thing to be part of that Niels forgot entirely to feel the cold, or to mind the dark, or to be a small boy alone at a window watching a long night come. He was not at the window now. He was out in the middle of it, one of the whole warm, busy village, making light. When the lantern stood ready all down the lane, pale humps of snow waiting in the dark, hundreds of them, it was time to light them. And the first one was always the grandmother's to light. She was the oldest in the village, Nils's grandmother, and she had made and lit a snow lantern on this longest night every year of her long life, as her own grandmother had before her. And so, as it was always done, the village quieted and made a little space around her, and she knelt down in the snow by the first lantern, slow, for she was old, with a single candle in her mittened hand. She lit it. The little flame caught and stood up steady in the still, cold air, and she leaned in and set the candle down inside the hollow snow, through the small door in the bottom of it, and the snow lantern came alight. It glowed. The thin walls of packed snow lit up from within, all at once, a soft, warm gold, the whole round dome of it shining out into the dark like a small moon set down in the snow. And a little sound went through the watching village, the soft sound people make when something is lovely, every year the same, and every year meant. There it was, the first light of the longest night. One small, warm gold glow, made of snow, and one candle, and an old woman's hands, standing in the huge blue dark. And the grandmother looked at it a moment, the way she had looked at the first one for 80 years. And then she looked up at all of them and said, "Well, light the rest." And they did. All down the lane the candles went round, hand to hand, and one by one the snow lanterns came alight. Gold glow after gold glow waking up the length of the lane, the dark giving way to them as they spread. Everyone had candles now, and everyone was lighting. The big lanterns by the doors, the small wobbly ones the children had made, the long rows of them down the paths, all of them coming alight. The whole village filling up with small gold lights. Niels had a candle of his own to carry. His mother had lit it for him from the grandmother's and told him to mind it. And he carried it cupped in both mittened hands like the most precious thing in the world, which just then it was. He lit his own crooked little lantern first, and knelt and watched it glow gold a moment with a pride too big for him. And then he went on down the lane, lighting others, a lantern by a doorstep, a lantern set up on a wall, a row of them along the path toward the river, touching his small flame to candle after candle, and leaving a glow behind him everywhere he went, so that he walked down through the dark trailing light, lighting his own way through the longest night. And the lights went down toward the river. That was where all the paths led, down the slope from the village to the frozen river below, where the broadest path of lanterns ran, both banks lined with them, lantern after lantern after lantern, all the way along the ice. The whole village was hurrying now, gently, in the last of the deep blue light, to get them all lit, every one, down to the river and along it, before the full dark came, and the dark was coming, down out of the huge winter sky. But the lights were rising to meet it, more and more of them, gold against the blue, until you could not have said, just then, which was the stronger, the dark or the light, only that they were meeting, everywhere, all down the village to the river. And then it was done, and the full dark came down, and the whole village stood lit. Niels came down to the river with the last of them, and stood on the bank and looked. And what he saw, he would remember the whole of his life. The whole village shone. Every path, every doorway, every lane was lined with the soft gold glow of the snow lanterns. Hundreds of them, more than anyone could count. Each one a small warm moon of light shining up out of the snow. And down at the river, both long banks ran with them. A double line of gold lights stretching away along the dark ice as far as he could see, doubling and shimmering where the glow lay out on the frozen river. The whole white world, that an hour before had been only cold and blue and going dark, was alight now, soft and gold and warm-looking, glowing out of the snow itself. And above it all, the huge dark sky of the longest night stood full of cold stars, and did not seem huge or frightening any more, but only like a great dark room with a great many small lamps lit in it, and all the village inside it, together, in the light they had made. Niels stood in the middle of it with his breath going up gold in the lantern light, and he was not the least bit afraid of the dark. How could you be in all this? The longest, darkest night of the whole year, and the village had gone and made it the most beautiful. It was the loveliest thing he had ever seen, and he had helped to make it. And so had everyone, every single soul in the village, out here together in the cold with their candles. They did not go straight in. No one wanted to, on the most beautiful night of the year, with all the lanterns lit. So they stayed out a while in the glowing dark. The whole village down by the river among the lights, and someone had a fire going on the bank, a real fire, big and crackling and orange, and there were hot drinks passed round in the cold, something sweet and steaming, and the little children ran shrieking and laughing up and down between the rows of snow lanterns. And the grown people stood about the fire and talked, their faces gold in the light. And the grandmother sat wrapped up warm on a bench by the fire and watched it all, content, the way she had watched it for 80 years. Niels drank his hot drink with both hands and stood close to the fire among all of them, warm now through and through, the cold all gone out of him, and looked down the river at the long lines of gold light shining on the ice, and back up at the lanterns climbing to the village. And he thought he had never been so happy, or so warm, on so cold and dark a night. And little by little, as the night went on and the children grew tired, the families began to drift home, back up the glowing paths to their warm houses, each one lit on its way by the snow lanterns. The long night still young, but the village ready now to spend it warm indoors, with all their small lights left burning outside in the dark to keep the longest night. And Niels carried the last of the way home half asleep on his father's back, lifted his heavy head and looked back once at the whole shining village and the long river of lights before he was taken in to the warm. The whole white village shining soft and gold in the deep blue dark. 1,000 little lanterns of snow and candlelight burning low and warm all down the paths and along the frozen river. The fire dying gentle on the bank. The houses warm. The village gone into sleep. And all the small lights left burning out in the cold, keeping the longest night, glowing on and on through the dark until the late, slow morning, while inside, warm, the whole village sleeps.